Hi, welcome to another episode of Build a Quick SwiftUI app with Design Plus Code. For this lesson, we'll build a recipe app. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Not another recipe app, right? Well, why not? It's very common and useful. Everybody must have seen a recipe app or at least browsed a recipe on the net before. So you already have an idea of how it's going to be. This recipe app is inspired by Spiciko. In fact, I was going to create one for my personal use, but then I found Spiciko. It is exactly what I need to save my favorite recipes, the ones I cook often or want to try. It even has a modern UI design, which is a bonus. Kudos to the developer. What I like is that the recipes don't have to be exclusive to a specific platform like Food Network or All Recipes. There are so many good ones from YouTube or Pinterest nowadays. Anything, anywhere, according to your preferences or dire restrictions. I don't want to be part of a community either. The app we will be building is going to allow us to store recipes, browse them, organize them by categories, and view the details of a certain recipe. We can also add a new recipe to our collection. That's about it. Let's start a new Xcode project. The template is an iOS app. I'm going to name this app Recipe Saver. The organization identifier is your domain in reverse. The interface is SwiftUI, the language is Swift. Leave out the use core data and include tests unchecked. Next. Save the project to a folder that is not synced to the cloud, or you'll risk breaking the app if not all of your code are synced properly. Create. It is important to well organize your files in any project. We're going to set up the folder structure. Alright, I just created 3 parent folders: Views, View Models, and Models. Inside the View folders, there are also 3 subfolders: Main, Detail, and Components. I have also moved the Content View file inside the main folder. Let's create the main views. We'll need 5 SwiftUI files for each tab, which we'll take care of it later. Alright, we have the home view that's going to list all the recipes. The categories view will list the recipes by category. The new recipe view that lets the user add a new recipe. The favorites view is to list the favorite recipes. And the settings view usually is to store the user settings. For each view, change the text, My Recipes, and embed it under a navigation view. To embed quickly, click on Command and then Embed Navigation View. Then add a navigation title, same as the text. For this demo app, we won't have the chance to work on the favorites view and the settings view. They're just there for the tab bar. Just pretend that the user haven't favorited any recipe yet, and that for the settings screen, we only display the first app version. Wait. This needs a padding. Speaking of the tab bar, create another file on the main, right underneath Content View. Call it tab bar. A tab bar is the bottom section where we can tap to access a given screen. To make a tab bar, add a tab view. Let's make the screen a bit bigger. Hope that helps. Let's add the main screens we just created. Home view, categories view, new recipe view, favorites, and finally settings view. For each of them, add the tab item. The tab item is going to be a text and an icon put together. The combination of label and icon is so common and needed that SwiftUI provides us with the label view from iOS 14 and on. We will use the icons from the SF Symbols icon set straight from Apple. I can show you how they look like. This is a large collection. So add a label view. Choose the option with the title and system image. For this one, the title is home, system image is house. Copy all of that to the other views. And change all the text and icon names. This is tab view in its simplest form without any customization. Next, add the tab bar in content view so that it's shown for all regular views. By regular, I mean a view that is not a sheet or full screen cover. Great, now run the preview and check that you can go between the relevant screens. Nice. Let's run the app too. Looks like there are some errors here. It seems to be constraint errors, unable to simultaneously satisfy constraints. Probably at least one of the constraints in the following list is one you don't want. In theory, the code should be fine. It seems to be related to the navigation title modifier though. If you happen to know the exact reason, please let me know in the comments below. To silence this error, add the navigation view style modifier as a stack to all navigation views. Okay. Then copy to all the remaining views. Run the app again. Wait. Okay. No more errors. Before we can show the recipes, we need some data, and data need modeling. Swift is quite strict about this, but at the same time, it'll prevent future troubles and bugs during the development. Let's lay down the model for recipe. Create a Swift file under models named a recipe model. It's going to be a Swift file this time. Then create the recipe model. It's going to conform to the identifiable protocol. because each recipe will be unique. To make each one unique, add the ID field, for which we'll generate a random string identifier using the UUID. The rest of the fields are commonly known for a recipe and will be of type string, except for the category. We have name, image, description, ingredients, directions, date published, and URL. The recipe category will follow a custom type. Let's create an enum to enumerate all the preset meal courses. Enum category. The value is going to be of type string. Then I'm just gonna paste all the cases instead of typing all of this. We have breakfast, soup, salad, appetizer, main, side, dessert, snack, and drink. Now that we have the category, then we can change the category type to use the raw value instead, meaning it'll read the string and not the case itself. Let's prepare some recipes in the form of static data. I chose forks over knives, plant-based recipes. I like to eat vegan and they have beautiful pictures. On top of that, they have a collection of holiday recipes. And since we're in December at the time of this recording, I took a few recipes from that collection. Don't they look great? Yum. As for you, just take a few recipes from any website. It'll do. Add an extension to recipe. And create a static variable all to store all the recipes in an array. Static. Let all type recipe array equal to array. Sweet. Static here means the property is shared among all instances of the struct so that it can be accessed easily. You could as well declare a global variable for that purpose. Choose your pick. Here, initialize as many recipes as you want. Let's try to see if we can use them. Go to Home View and embed the text in a list. Pass in recipe.all. Instead, put the recipe here and change this text to the recipe.name. Resume. Awesome. Now that we have data to work with, we can continue on UI and navigation next. The most interesting part of a recipe is the picture, am I right? The picture is what makes you want to cook it or eat it. Showing a list of plain text is just too boring. So we'll turn this basic list into cards with images. Ideally, we start from the bottom up. By that, I mean the recipe card and then the list, and finally the main view. So create a new SwiftUI file under the components folder. Name it recipe card. This component will receive a recipe prop, var recipe of type recipe. You'll see an error right away in the preview. Fix the proposed error by passing any recipe from the recipe.all array in the initializer. So fix recipe.all, and let's take the first item. Display the recipe name for the moment. In our static data, the image field is a URL string. Well, new from Swift 3 and iOS 15.0, AsyncImage provides a way to asynchronously load and display an image. Before, we'd have to apply custom code to load an image remotely or to rely on third-party SDKs such as SDWebImage. Thank you, SwiftUI. Back to recipe card, add the AsyncImage view instead of the text view with the URL, content, and placeholder. Initialize a new URL with the string. That's going to be the recipe image. So return the image. There's a placeholder option for when the image fails to load. For the placeholder, we'll display an image with the photo icon. System name will be a photo. Let's frame the card first so we can see well the image placement. Embed everything in a V-stack. Okay. Frame it with a width of 160, height of 217, and alignment dot top. Set the background color to a gradient like this. So there's two colors of gray. The first gray is paler because I set the opacity to 0.3. And then it goes to a regular gray from the starting point top to endpoint bottom. Round the corners using .clip shape. Rounded rectangle. Corner radius of 20. And the style is continuous. I believe that's the apple rounded corner. Then add a shadow, color dot black, dot opacity of 0.3, radius of 15, x0, y10. Now make the placeholder resizable and scale to fit. Frame it with a width of 40, height of 40, and alignment center. Set the foreground color to white with an opacity of 0.7. Finally, to center the icon in the middle of the card, frame it with a max width of dot infinity. Max height of infinity also. And actually, we don't need to specify the alignment since it is centered by default. Back to the real image, run the preview to see it live, since it's a remote URL and needs to fetch the data. Here's the thing, if we want to add modifiers to the image, we cannot do it on the async image, but on the image in the closure instead. Let me show you. Make it resizable. I don't even have that option. So resizable. Voila. But the image is now skewed. So set the aspect ratio to content mode fill. Much better. We finished with the image. What's missing is the text on top to present the name of the recipe. Add an overlay modifier with a bottom alignment. The content inside is going to be a text view with the recipe name. Set the font to headline. And foreground color to white. Frame it with a max width of 136 so that the text is not touching the sides. Add a padding to push the text a bit up. Sometimes a white text can be hard to read, so add a black shadow with a radius of 3. After the foreground color, colored black, radius 3, 0 for X and 0 for Y. Apply the same overlay to the placeholder's image. And we have a custom card with a remote picture. Stop the preview to see the placeholder now. Actually, AsyncImage also provides the face in combination with image that notifies if the loading is in progress, done, or gives an error. In this demo app though, whether the image is loading or can't load, I only want to show a placeholder. We completed the design of the individual recipe card. We'll make use of this component to show a collection of recipe cards using a grid system. Create a new SwiftUI file under the Components folder. Call it recipe list. The recipe list accepts a recipe array as a prop. Var recipes. Same here, add all the recipes in the preview. Recipe.all here. In this view, we display the total number of recipes on top and the collection of cards underneath. So start with the VStack. And add a horizontal padding. Add a text view. We're going to use a string literal. The first variable will be the recipes count. Space. The next variable, we're going to check if the recipes count is greater than 1. If so, return the recipes in plural, else return in singular. This is a ternary operator. A ternary operator is a short version of an if-else statement. Set the font to headline. The font weight to medium. And the opacity 2.7. To align the text to the left, embed it in an H stack and add a spacer. For the cards, there are two ways to go about it. You could use a list or a grid view. A list always presents one item per row, whereas a grid can display as many rows and columns as specified, or it can even be flexible according to the device. It's the latter option we go with. Add a lazy V grid. It's a view that grows vertically according to the number of items. We specify the columns as an array of grid items with an adaptive layout. .adaptive. Each grid item has a minimum size of 160, no maximum, and a spacing of 15 pixels between them. Additionally, the columns will have also a spacing of 15 pixels. Now look through the recipes with for each and return the recipe card. Add a little more spacing between the title and the grid with the top padding. But the cards are cut at the top and bottom edges of the screen. When there are more images than the page can fit, the grid can go over the boundary of the container. Obviously, in this case, allow the user to scroll down. So for the preview, add a scroll view. Finally, the recipe collection is ready to be applied to home view. In home view, replace the list with the component recipe list. And pass recipe.all. Nice. Now, same for the preview. Embed this in a scroll view. I need to put back the navigation title. Now run the app to see how the home screen looks like. Try to click on the card, but nothing happens. I take it you already guessed that this should lead to the set recipe. This is what we're going to implement next. Create a new file under Detail called Recipe View. We'll pass the whole recipe as prop. Var recipe of type recipe. As usual, fix the preview. This view is nothing more than just featuring the picture on top and showing each detail below. Since this is the outer container in a new view, start with the scroll view. Go to recipe card, copy the async image, paste here, remove an overlay because we don't need it. Change the placeholder's image frame to 100. As well, frame the image view with a height of 300. And set the background to a linear gradient gray like before. There's a white space at the top here, so add an ignore safe area dot container, the edges dot top. Run the preview, and we have an image. Underneath, we'll let the user read the recipe name, description, ingredients, and directions. Wrap this information in a VStack with a spacing of 30. First, add a text view for the recipe's name. Set a font of large title in bold and multi-line text alignment of center. This is to make sure that if the text is long enough to use more than one line, it'll be centered. Add another VStack to contain the rest of the details with an alignment of leading, spacing of 30. For the content, add a text view again with the recipe's description. As you can see, the description information does not have the title, but the ingredients and the directions they do. So for them, create a VStack with an alignment of leading again, spacing of 20. We're going to add the remaining title and text. Dot font for this one, dot line. Copy this. To top it all off, ensure to align the outer VStack to the left by framing it to take the whole width. This one, dot frame, max width, dot infinity, no height, alignment, leading. Needs a padding here. Dot horizontal. Next. A bonus tip. What happens if the recipe has no description, ingredients, or directions? The text view is still going to show and there will be extra spacing. I can show you. Go to our model and try to, let's say, remove the description here to leave it an empty string. Go back to recipe view. See, extra spacing. Okay. Undo. Come back. To cater to this situation, it would be wise to check if the string is not empty first. Start with the description. If recipe dot description is empty, not, apply the same logic to the other ones, but wrapping the whole VStack. It's time to utilize this view. Go to recipe list, add a navigation link here. The destination will be the recipe view we just created. And move up the recipe card. Now run the preview from the home view. And try to navigate to the recipe view. Wow. Now run the app and test the same. This is dope. Earlier, we set up some categories associated to the meal type. As you may have guessed, the category screen is where the recipes are organized by category. This is basically the same as the home view, but with an additional filter. That's all. So go to categories view. Delete the text and create a list instead. Inside it, add a for each loop that's going to iterate over all the category dot all cases here. Category in. And we're going to show the text of the category string plus an S. And now we get a couple of errors. The first one is type category has no member all cases. Now I could create a variable listing all the categories of food that is basically the category enum, but in plural. However, I like to reuse things the most I can. It is possible to loop through all the cases of an enum type by conforming to the protocol case iterable. So go to recipe model, add a case iterable here, then its all cases property will be made available. And now there's another error. Referencing initializer init content on for each requires that category conform to identifiable. The simplest method would be to add self as the ID. But there's another way, especially if you plan to reuse a sequence. Let me show you. Go back to recipe model, add a protocol for identifiable and var id of type string self.raw value. This property ID is going to uniquely identify each case of the enum. Currently, we see a list of categories, but we can't interact with them. Let's say tapping on mains should go to another screen with the list of recipes whose category is main, right? We'll add a navigation link with a destination of a scroll view of the recipe list. And the recipes will be recipe.all.filter 0.category is equal to category dot raw value. Now move the text to be the label. The $0 sign here refers to a wildcard, meaning I don't care nor want to name the item variable in the closure. The wildcard syntax allows for shorter coding, much like the explicit return in JavaScript. Run the preview and try to navigate to a category. All right. It seems to be missing the navigation titles though. Add the navigation title modifier to the scroll view. At this point, it looks like the operation is too complicated to understand. Perhaps it's because of the navigation title in the receiving view? I thought I could get away with not joining another file for 3 lines of code. We're gonna have to code split as suggested. Ideally, it should be done like this anyway. Create a new SwiftUI file under Details for Category View. Define a variable category as a prop of type category enum. Then copy the scroll view and what's inside with the navigation title. Replace it with category view. Go back to category view and paste it in lieu of the text. Here, let's fix the preview. So I'm gonna choose the dessert. Since we made a new file for the category view, we could as well keep the filtering logic outside of the view. We could add a function to return the filter results by category, or simpler yet, set a computed property, resulting in the recipes being filtered on demand in that view. So here, this is going to be a computed property, var recipe. It's an array of recipe. Return, and this function
goes here. And now use the recipes variable or computed property instead. Resume the preview. Let's check the categories view. Okay. Run the app and test the navigation and data filtering to see everything is fine. Yeah, the data is being filtered because we see the correct number of recipes by category. So what we have done until now is just reading data. A recipe saving app is an app that allows the user to add a new recipe to the collection, isn't it? This is what's involved in the next part. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.